Welcome, everyone. Welcome as people are coming in. We appreciate you all being here. This is also being broadcast live on our Facebook at Busboys and Poets. So if you have friends that are unable to be able to get into the Zoom call, they can actually go directly to our Facebook and be able to see it there. Also, we'll keep it on our Facebook there forever. So anytime that you'd like to go back and look at it, review it, watch it, tell your friends about it, it'll still be there for them to be able to enjoy. We've been doing these Zoom calls ever since the beginning of the pandemic. It's been a great way for us to connect with some of the people we love. Linda Sarsour, of course, today being one of them. And we've had some really amazing speakers, and we'll be having so many more in the coming few weeks and months. So I invite you to continue to come back here on Friday nights at 6 p.m. What a great way to end the week. Meet somebody interesting, have a conversation, get to know some folks that are doing amazing work despite the pandemic and in spite of the pandemic. And it's really great and exciting to see people continuing to do the activism they do. So today we have, of course, Linda Sarsour. She was the co-chair of the 2017 Women's March on Washington that I'm sure many of you attended. And she is now the co-founder of Untitled Freedom, an organization that's seeking justice for the murder of Breonna Taylor, as well as highlighting police brutality, particularly against brown and Black people in this country. She has been recognized by Fortune magazine as one of the 50 greatest leaders and featured in Times magazine as one of the 100 most influential people in the world in 2017. She is a frequent media commentator on issues impacting Muslim community, Middle Eastern affairs, criminal justice. She's an author. She wrote a book called We Are Not Here to Be Bystanders, a memoir of love and resistance. She was at Busboys and Poets right before the pandemic. And I think it was the last book event we did at Busboys and Poets before the pandemic hit. She has been called every Islamophobe's worst nightmare. Thank you for being a nightmare to so many. And thank you for joining us on the Zoom call, Linda.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Andy, for having me. I'm so excited to be back with our friends at Busboys, and I'm so grateful that you continue to do these events, even though we're going through a global pandemic, but it's a great way to stay connected.
Absolutely. We had just had your friend Alicia Garza here,
Yes.
I think a couple weeks ago. That was a lot of fun having a conversation with her. I saw an interview she did with you at the Metropolitan Club or some club, some fancy club somewhere.
Yes, we are the Commonwealth Club.
The Commonwealth Club, that's the one. So I want to get right down to what's happening right at this moment. The latest stuff, of course, is Kamala Harris is now the nominee for Vice President of the United States on the Democratic Party. I know you've been very critical of the party for many years for many reasons. What's your initial thoughts about Kamala Harris being the vice presidential pick?
It's no secret that I've been a critic of both Vice President Joe Biden and also Senator Kamala Harris on many issues that I deeply care about, including things like Medicare for all and, of course, around criminal justice reform. But I also, Andy, didn't want to take from the moment of how historic that we have now nominated a Black woman to be the vice presidential nominee. And we really have to sit with that. Kamala Harris may not, in fact, align with me in particular on many issues, but she does, in fact, align with the progressive movement on some issues. And if there was a choice between Susan Rice and Kamala Harris, Biden actually made a more progressive choice, even though for me, it's not where I am on the progressive spectrum of the movement. And so right now, the way that I'm really framing this election, and remember, Andy, I said this to you and the many people that came out that day when I came to Busboys. I mean, it was such a beautiful sold out event. And I said to the people there, the way that I'm framing this election is that I'm electing my opponent in the White House. Who do I want to fight? Who do I want to build movement around? Who do I want to push to be better and do better? And I am choosing to elect Biden Harris to become those opponents in the White House, because there is no way to move a fascist. I cannot move Donald Trump anywhere, but I can build mobilization and build the political will for President, hopefully, Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris. And I will continue to be critical of the party. I will continue to be critical of both of these individuals in hopes that our criticism of them makes them better people.
You were a very strong supporter, of course, of Bernie Sanders. You were a surrogate for him as well, doing a lot of speaking on his behalf. And I haven't heard much about him lately with this pick. Am I just missing some of the news, or have you heard from him? What is his thoughts about this?
I think Bernie Sanders is really a man, and which is one of the reasons why I support Bernie. I don't just support Bernie because he aligned with me on many of my views. I actually supported him because he's a strategic man, and he also he's a class act. He understands what we have to do, and he understands, Andy, that the right thing to do is sometimes the hardest thing to do. So what he has said publicly is he welcomes Kamala's new nomination to the ticket. He has made a commitment to elect this ticket. You know, he's going to the DNC convention. He will be speaking in support of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm a DNC delegate for Bernie Sanders from the state of New York. I voted for Bernie Sanders again. I just still think we have to be on the record so the Democratic Party does not take us for granted. I also voted no on the platform for the Democratic Party. That was my official vote as a delegate. And the reason why I voted no on the platform is for a couple of reasons, but fundamentally for the fact that it did not include Medicare for all. And you know this, the DNC platform isn't a real document. It's an aspirational document. It's about values and principles. No one ever goes back to the platform and says, here are all the things that we're going to check off. It's really, what do we stand for as a party? And the fact that our party still does not stand for healthcare for all people is something that I couldn't bring myself to put my name on. So I voted no on the DNC platform. But Bernie is in. Bernie wants to defeat fascism in America. Bernie sees the writing on the wall. As you know, he's a Jewish American who is very proud of his Jewish heritage. He sees what's happening. He's old enough to remember these things. So I'm with Bernie Sanders on electing Biden Harris to be the nominee, the president and the vice president of the United States of America.
When you're talking about electoral politics, it's a a lot of people that are in the grassroots, a lot of community organizers oftentimes shun electoral politics, and say, if it's not the perfect person that's up there, I'm not going to go out and vote. I'm going to do most of my work on the streets. I'm going to make things happen. I'm going to make movements. And in reality, movements is what really change this country in many ways. What do you say to people that say, you know what, this ticket is not great. I'm not going to go give them an endorsement, but I'll continue to fight against fascism and fight against the oligarchy that's been developed right now with this current regime, even further than it ever had been. What do you say to people that you work with? Because you're on the ground, you work with those folks.
Listen, Andy, as soon as I said, listen, I'm going to elect Biden as my opponent in the White House, then I started getting all what I call, many of them, critics without credentials. A lot of people talking about we have to dismantle the duopoly, take down the two-party system. Everybody wants a revolution. Andy, I'm a revolutionary, and a revolutionary means that I'm willing to die for what I believe in. I'm in the street every day. I'm going up against police departments across the country. I'm in Louisville, Kentucky. I moved to the South of America to organize around something that I believe in. And I'm willing to do everything. I've given everything. I've given my life. I've given my kids to the movement. I've given everything that I have. And so my question to those people is, what are you ready to sacrifice? You can't just sit behind and write op-eds and post on social media around this idea that the two-party system doesn't work. If you want a third and fourth and fifth party, we got to start building those parties. But right now, those parties are not here, and do not tell me the Green Party is the party that reflects my views and the party that I'm going to vote for, because I'm not doing it. And so what I'm saying to people is you have to frame elections as a tool. We're not going to get free from the electoral process. Elections don't bring us liberation. But what they do is harm reduction. And that's very important to me. Right now, Andy, we have Muslim families who are separated from their loved ones because of the Muslim ban. We have children who we ripped from their mother's arms who have not yet been reunited under the policies of this administration. We have been fighting for women's reproductive rights in a way that women haven't had to fight in 50 years. We are seeing mass deportations. If you want to binge Netflix, I want you to watch Immigration Nation, which is on Netflix. It is horrific to see the policies that have changed under this administration, where we're literally going at night, 5 o'clock in the morning, and snatching moms and dads and babies crying in this documentary. You have to see it to understand what fascism actually looks like. In Portland, Oregon, you literally have unidentified federal agents jumping out of vans, kidnapping people in the street. So this is not the time to start talking about a vision that people have for 20 years from now. You need to think about today. And today tells me that I'm going to be, and you know me, I'm already planning it. We're going to have to protest the first day that Biden and Harris get inaugurated, the same thing I did with Trump. The next day, guess where I'm going to be? I'm going to be in Washington, D.C. And I'm going to make sure that Biden and Harris understand that we are going to mass mobilize people, hold them accountable, build the political will for them to say, oh my God, we got to do better. Because these people out here are crazy. We got to figure out how to do something, because these people are not going to stop being at our doorstep. And so what I say to those people is, if you're not out in the street here, and if you're not willing to, as Malcolm X said, and Hajj Malik Shabazz said, if you are not willing to die for freedom, then just get that word out of your vocabulary. I am a person that's telling you, I'm not a person who sits in boardrooms. I'm not a person that is just a social media sensation. I'm in the street. And I'm telling you right now, we have to defeat fascism in America. If you give Donald Trump 4 more years, what you are doing is you are basically sentencing more people in this country to even more trauma that they were experiencing in the last 4 years. And of course, we know in the many years before then. And the last thing that I'll say, Andy, is that I'm equal opportunity. I was doing civil disobedience against President Obama. I've gotten arrested multiple times under the Obama administration. I organized around immigrant rights against the Obama administration, and I'm doing it against Trump. So I'm not one of those Democratic apologists. I'm not the one that says, oh, we got a Democrat in the White House. That's it. I'm cool now. And that's the problem that we did with Obama. We trusted Obama. We said Obama is a constitutional lawyer. Obama was an organizer from the South Side of Chicago. He knows us. He got this. And we left him by himself. I don't blame Obama. I blame us. We put Obama in there. We gave him no mobilization. We gave him no movement. And we expected him just to magically do what was right. We left Obama. And so for me, I'm not mad at Obama. Did he do things that I'm horrified by? Absolutely. But you know what? Where were we to be at his doorstep in the hundreds of thousands to tell him, you will not do that, Obama, on our watch? They passed the Patriot Act. Where the hell were we when they passed the Patriot Act? The war in Iraq happened. I mean, where were we? And so all I'm saying to people is that I will do Republicans and Democrats. I have no loyalty to political parties. I have loyalty to the people that are in our communities that we love. So just get out into the street, commit to the day after the election, but together right now, let's defeat this fascist in the White House.
You're going to be going to the convention, I take it? Or I mean, online, it's a virtual convention. So you'll be involved in the convention at some level, correct?
Yes, I'm an official delegate from the state of New York.
I actually ran for delegate here in DC, but Biden couldn't make the 15% threshold. So unfortunately, he gets 0 delegates. But anyway, there's a couple of speakers that have been announced at the convention, AOC being one of them. But glaringly, as you pointed out, there are no Muslim speakers at all. What is being done? Is that a done deal, or is there a lot of lobbying to try to get people to speak? I know years ago when I was a Jerry Brown delegate, when Jerry Brown ran for office, they were trying to keep Jerry Brown from speaking, and we started this movement called Let Jerry Speak, and finally Jerry got to speak. But is there an effort to try to get more diverse voices on the speakers list?
You know, the honest to God truth, Andy, is that this Democratic Party is really, I mean, I don't even have words for the Democratic Party sometimes. It's almost like I don't know if they're salvageable sometimes. I don't know if who are the strategists there? Who are the people sitting back? I mean, if I was sitting as a strategist in the Democratic Party, which I'm not, I would ask myself, who am I trying to talk to at the DNC convention? This is virtual. Who am I trying to talk to? And then I would say, we need to talk to Bernie bros. We need to talk to young progressives. We need to talk to young people of color. Who are the different voices that we need to bring to the table that will attract these folks to the Democratic Party? So they went and said, we're going to give you one. They gave us AOC. I love AOC. I think AOC is one of the most profound young elected officials we have in this country. They called AOC and they told her, you got 60 seconds. And not only do you have just 60 seconds, you have to pre-record what you're saying so that, so the DNC could overall see what she's saying, to try to tell her what to say and what not to say.
60 seconds, you said? Did he say 60 seconds?
60. She only has 1 minute.
1 minute.
One whole minute.
I had no idea. That was,
Yes, this is all public information. Despicable that the Democratic Party will bring one of the most profound young people in America who actually can pull a lot of people into the party and told her, you got 1 minute and you got to pre-record what you're saying. They also don't have a single Muslim. And what's interesting here is in 2016, if you remember, we had Khizr Khan, who was the father of a young man who was killed, in war. He was like a father of a veteran who was killed. And he got up, he was the guy with the Constitution with his wife, who was there. There were other Muslim representation of directly impacted people at the convention, meaning on the program. And then here we are, 2020, instead of moving forward, we move backwards. Not one single Muslim. And you know this, Andy, we have plenty of people. You could have put up, first of all, put up one of the first Muslim American women in Congress. How about that? Why don't you put up one of the other 2 Muslims that we had before the 2 Muslims? You know, you have Andre Carson, you have Congressman Keith Ellison. You also have prominent voices in the politics like Dr. Abdullah Sayed. You have Muslims who've won political office across this country from state.
We have you.
Listen, you know they're not going to put me on the stage. That's okay, and I'm all right with that because that's not my role.
Well, if they're smart, they would.
I mean, if they were smart, they would. But at the same time, that also, I have a credibility issue here. So I'm not trying to be too close. I want to be involved, but I don't want to be too close. But there's so much brilliance. Why would you go backwards and not have not even one person from the Muslim American community? In fact, for a Trump administration, this is your moment to say, we reflect all people of color. We represent all religious communities in America and directly impacted. You know what would have been really powerful, Andy, if someone was really thinking? They would have wanted to get a father or a mother who's separated from her child or from her husband because of the Muslim ban. Someone who stands up on the Democratic platform and says, you know what? I don't need you to vote for who you like, but vote for me. Vote for me as a Muslim who's separated from my family because of this administration, because of Trump. I need you to vote him out so I could be reunited with my family. You know how powerful that message would have been? You don't even need somebody who's a celebrity. Find me a Muslim who's separated from their loved ones. But again, there's no strategy. And it is very disappointing that we always, and this is why I do agree with the folks who are critics, and I'm with them. I am so tired of cleaning up after the Democratic Party. And I'm ashamed that every 4 years I have to come back and be like, listen, folks, I know, oh my God, but this time around, I'm not telling you that this is the lesser of 2 evils. It's actually much more serious than the lesser of 2 evils. This is fascism and not fascism. And I know that the bar is low to say that Biden and Harris are not fascists, because they're not, but to say that I see their potential. And I really believe that we could build a movement around a Biden-Harris administration where we could truly push them to the next step. And the last thing that I'll say, Andy, to your point, is we cannot underestimate right now where we are in the Democratic Party. And I mean the unofficial party, not the DNC. I'm talking about just as Democrats. Just last week, we elected Cori Bush in St. Louis, Missouri. Cori Bush just took out a 50-year dynasty in the Clay family. This is a woman who says, free Palestine. I'm a supporter of the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement. She was a Ferguson protester. She is a brilliant, bold, unapologetic Black woman. And let me tell you, if you think AOC is fire, you have not met Cori Bush. And I cannot wait for Cori Bush to go to Congress. We just re-elected Ilhan Omar. Everybody said right-wing Zionist money, dark money. She's vulnerable. Oh my God, Ilhan might lose her race. That's what the pundit said. Not only did Ilhan win again, she got 20,000 more votes this time than she got in 2018. Rashida, they said Rashida is vulnerable. She's Palestinian. She's running in a predominantly Black district. 70% of the district where Rashida is predominantly Black. They went and ran a Black woman who's the president of the city council, someone who's connected to a lot of corporate money, etc. They said, oh, this time around, Rashida's not going to be able to make it. Brenda Jones has a lot of name recognition, has a lot of relationships. Rashida won. She crushed it. You know why, Andy? Because people always underestimate the voters. The voters don't care about who you are and what. They want to know what you're going to do for the people. And Rashida has proved her track record to the people of Detroit. They said, you know what? Rashida, this is what they call her in the district, by the way, which is so adorable. And when I went to knock doors for her, and they were like, who? Are you working for Rashida? We want Rashida. I swear to God, they love her in her district. And you know what? She won with a mandate. She really won her race, not by 500, 900 votes. She won with a mandate. So all I'm saying to you, and one more race that's really important to mention, Andy, is in New York.
Yes.
In New York, we defeated the most pro-Israel candidate in the entire US Congress, which was Representative Eliot Engel. He held very high positions in Congress. And
Our
Jamal
protested
Bowman,
in front of his office many times.
yeah, ooh, Engel was not a friend of mine, let me tell you.
Yeah.
Jamal Bowman was a school principal, a man who was a principal of a school with 99% Black children. And he got up one day and said, I'm tired of the trauma. I'm tired of the pain that my students are experiencing. I'm tired of this violence. I'm tired of police violence and gun violence. I'm just going to get up and run for office. What's the worst that's going to happen? I lose? Just everybody runs and loses. He didn't lose, Andy. He won, and he won on his first run because people are sick and tired of the old politics. And right now, my trust is in the voters. And I know the voters are going to do the right thing. But my point is that the Democratic Party got to catch up to us. I don't have to catch up to the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party got to catch up to me. And what I promise you in the next 2 years and the next 4 years is we're just going to add more Cori Bushes, more Ilhan Omars, more Rashidas, and more Jamals and more AOCs. And that's what I'm proud of. And that's the work that we're doing right now.
We're already seeing lots of smoke signals from the Trump administration that this election is going to be possibly contested. There's an effort to block the, any funding for the mail service. And already the post office has mentioned that they're not going to be able to get the ballots out to at least 46 states. There has been a lot of noise out there about what would happen. And surprisingly enough, and I don't know how the polls are how dependable they are, but the latest Fox News poll came out and showed that Trump is only 7 points behind the Biden-Harris ticket. He's at 42 to their 49, which is quite shocking, frankly, considering all that's happening, all the people that have died because of this pandemic, all the missteps that this administration has done. The economy's tanking, the world is coming to an end, and yet they still have 42% support, which means that it probably might be a close election. And the possibility of them, delegitimizing the election is real. You have to believe that. What provisions are there that you know of through the grassroots and other ways that are happening right now to try to prevent such thing from happening?
I mean, if this USPS conversation does not tell you that you have a fascist in the White House that's literally willing to tank the postal service so that they don't mail ballots on time, I don't know what else they have to do, Andy. I don't know what else this administration has to prove to you that they are fascists and that they believe that they are above the law. Here's what I'm telling folks that we need to do. The bottom line here is that I will crawl on glass if I have to get to a polling booth, because the only polls that matter is what happens on election day. Because if you remember, Andy, right before the 2016 election, everybody was chilling. Everybody was like, there's no way that this buffoon is going to win office. I heard that everywhere. No one even believed. And in fact, I think the Hillary Clinton campaign didn't believe he could win, which is why they didn't campaign in Michigan and Wisconsin. I was in Michigan, nowhere to be found. And so they underestimated the Donald Trump phenomenon in this country. And so what I'm saying to people is we need a backup plan. Voter turnout in the United States of America in proportion to the amount of registered voters is embarrassing. I'm embarrassed to tell the rest of the world the percentage of people based on the electorate who actually go to vote. So what does that mean? We have to be ready that what you said is going to happen. Ballots are not going to be mailed in on time. Voter suppression is going to happen. So that means everybody else who was in 2016 who said, I don't give a shit, I'm not voting in this election, this is stupid, Hillary's going to win, I'm just going to sit at home. Or the people that said, I don't like Hillary, I'm not going to vote for her because of my personal issues and feelings. I need those people to understand this is code red situation that we're in right now. Like, I don't know what else we got to do. Emergency, all the lights are on. I'm literally sounding the alarm. And when a revolutionary like me sounding the alarm, trust me when I tell you, you need to understand and believe what I'm saying. So that means that we have to increase voter turnout exponentially to cover for what we believe is going to be voter suppression in the form of ballots not being mailed and received, and also for closing down polling sites in Black and brown communities. Like, we have to tell our uncle, aunts right now. I always tell people, if you don't want to be in the street, don't worry about the street. We got the street. Go home right now. Make a list of people in your family, and you call every single person you know and say, are you registered to vote? Are you registered to vote? And just register the people that you know. I will worry about knocking on doors of the strangers. You worry about your friends, your colleagues, your coworkers, your partner, your mother-in-law, your father-in-law, your sister-in-laws. That's who I need you to worry about. So the provision, the only provision we have to us, remember, Andy, we are not the ones in power. I cannot control Donald Trump. I cannot control their voter suppression, but what I can do is I can overwhelm the electoral system by exponentially increasing voter turnout, where no matter how much they try to steal this election, we can't let them steal this election. And so the focus is voter registration, voter engagement, and getting people to the polls on election day.
And of course, you've been keeping up with the birthers, talking about Kamala's birther record and all of that. That's an old trope. Obviously, it's come back over and over again. Anyone who doesn't look like them is suddenly considered not really American, and they have to start bringing up these issues. What are your thoughts about that?
Listen, I was telling people, I had to yell at some people. I was watching people on Facebook, the Republicans and those who enable them, sometimes who are people of our party. What they do is they allow for these conversations to happen. You and I can debate about Kamala Harris's record, and there is many, many areas of debate. But we, at no point, Andy, should we allow the Republicans and their enablers to debate a woman's blackness. Kamala Harris is Black. That's the bottom line. It is not for Andy to say whether she's Black or for me to say whether she's Black. It is not for us to decide who's an American and who's not an American, because that is a slippery slope to go down. We need to be firm and say, let's debate Kamala Harris, but we will not allow birtherism, because you know that they'll do that to you, Andy. They'll do that to me. I'm born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. You know how many times in a week somebody tells me, go back to your country? My country is the United States of America. My country is Brooklyn, New York. And so I know what it means to be seen as someone who doesn't belong here. The Trump administration, the Republican Party, their enablers cannot decide who's an American and who is Black and who's this and who's that. And we have to be able to stand together as progressives, leftists, centrists, neoliberals, anybody, and say, we will not allow you to attack Kamala Harris on her identity, but we will be glad to have a conversation with you about her record. And that's where we need to keep no ad hominem attacks. It's just not going to work. And to be honest, I'm sensitive because Kamala is a Black woman. And at the end of the day, Andy, whether we agree with her or not, we know in this country, Black women are attacked, they're targeted, and there is much double standards when it comes to the way in which we treat a Black woman. And let's be clear, Amy Klobuchar is a cop. She did not get the same attacks that Kamala Harris received during the campaign, because everyone kept saying, Kamala is a cop, Kamala is a cop, Kamala is a cop. Well, guess what? Klobuchar is a cop. And not only is Klobuchar a cop, she too was a prosecutor. She was the woman who did not prosecute the same police officer who killed George Floyd. And you know what? She's speaking at the DNC convention. That's how out of touch the DNC people are, that they would put the woman who that did not prosecute the cop who killed, who actually was the one that kneeled on the neck of George Floyd. So you see, there's a white woman, there's a Black woman, same credentials, but for some reason in our country, we had the left targeted Kamala in a very, very rigorous way, and they kind of left Amy a little open. And that's why Amy was able to go much farther in the campaign than Kamala did. And that is something we have to recognize and acknowledge, to say that was wrong. You want to go after one woman, you go after them for their record. I will not stand by and watch a Black woman get smeared and get attacked and targeted, because this country is all about double standards, and I'm not going to be a part of it.
We'll be talking a little bit more about, in just a few minutes, about Until Freedom, the organization you helped co-found. But I wanted to talk a little bit more about the election, because that's on everybody's mind. Given how polarized this country is, given that the numbers that I mentioned earlier, the 49 to 42% breakdown about the election itself, and given the polarization that has happened, how workable is this country at this point? I mean, is it time to secede? Is it time to create two countries out of this? Because the people are just so divided, and the minute we have the enthusiasm for one candidate, they have equal and opposite enthusiasm for somebody completely on the other side. And I'm just trying to figure out, where does this, where does this end? It's becoming more and more polarized. You have the Corey Bushes, you have the OCs, you have the Ilhan Omars, you have the Rashidas, you have others who are coming in, who are pushing in one direction and creating this opposite force on the other side that's going insane. So how do you square that?
To be honest, Andy, I don't actually believe in this perspective of we are a very polarized nation to the point of separation, right? I don't actually believe that at all. I think the media, as Malcolm X taught us, is a very dangerous entity. And sometimes, yes, they're helpful in building narrative and pushing forth narrative, but they also can be very divisive in showing the two opposite polarizations of two different sides. And I'm going to give you an example, and you already know this about me, Andy. I'm in Louisville, Kentucky right now. A few weeks ago, we did a direct action outside of the home of Daniel Cameron, who's the Attorney General of the state of Kentucky, who has a lot of power and influence over the case of Breonna Taylor. So when we got to the front of the house of Daniel Cameron, and it was a very, very well executed direct action, to the point that the people who were with us didn't even know where they were going. We never told anyone what the destination was because we did not want the police department to know where we were going. And when I got to the street with these about 150 of us, 87 of the 150 got arrested, there were white neighbors who came outside. And we were told that the community in which Daniel Cameron lives is a very conservative community, right? So we went outside, and all of a sudden, all the white neighbors came out. Lots of, I would say average age 60, came out, because they were like, what the hell are all these people doing in our street? And mind you, majority of the people that came were Black. I was like one of the it was me and maybe 12 other allies who were not Black. So they came out really concerned. So I took a megaphone and I went back to the street and I started talking to the neighbors. They all gathered. And I said to them, good afternoon, everyone. We apologize for any inconvenience this may cause you, but we want you to know why we're here. We're here because your neighbor, Attorney General Daniel Cameron, is now in charge of the case of Breonna Taylor, who was an essential worker, an EMT worker, who was murdered in her home in the middle of the night at the hands of the LMPD. And it's been, at the time, it was about 135 days since Breonna Taylor had been murdered. And there still has been no progress in the investigation. Nothing has happened. Her mother is still in, mourning, and there's no this and that. These white neighbors who are supposed to be Republicans, who are supposed to be conservatives, you should have saw them, Andy. This one old man was leaning in like this, really trying to be attentive to listen to every word that I was saying. And then after I finished kind of doing an announcement, and all of our people were nice and quiet, listening to this conversation, I went over and I started having a conversation with the neighbors. And these Republicans that had, one of them had a Blue Lives Matter thing outside his house. And he said, I didn't know that it was in the middle of the night. I didn't even know any of these things about this case. This is not what I knew. And so I started explaining to them even more details about this case. And we did the direct action. And I told them, we just wanted you to know why we were here. Went back, did the action, get arrested. Then the next day, white supremacists who were not at the event started making comments on the, articles about our action. You will not believe this, Andy, if I told you that on the comments, and I screenshotted all of them because people told us to go look at them. The neighbors, little old white people, were in the comments saying, this is a lie. These people were peaceful. They have every right to protest. They did not do what you said. You know what they also did? There were water bottles. They picked up all the water bottles. They kept the street just as clean as they found it. The same people who are supposed to be conservatives started defending us online. And so what I say to people all the time, Andy, is I believe, as a person who's trained in Kingian nonviolence, one of the principles of nonviolence says that you believe that the universe is on the side of justice. I truly believe in my heart, Andy, when we get into conversations individually with people and you explain and you give them an opportunity to hear what is happening, more times than not, people will really come to your side. The problem that we have is we have these flashpoints, viral moments online. Everybody's yelling and screaming. That's not how it is in real life. And I think we need to get back into having those conversations. Right now, as you know, we live in Louisville, Kentucky. I'm not gonna lie to you. I went to the neighborhood in the street that we rented in, and I knocked on all the doors because I didn't want people to see these Black people and Muslims walking in and out of this house and seeing we have SUVs parked outside. We have boxes of T-shirts that are being delivered, donations. if you know, it could be suspicious to some people. You already know Black people and Muslims in one house, and some of them are Black Muslims, could be a suspicious situation. I went to the neighbor's house and said, listen, here, we are a group called Until Freedom. We have moved. We are your neighbors. We want to be good neighbors. We're here to fight for Breonna Taylor. If there are any concerns, if you have any questions, you can feel free to come knock on our door. Here's my cell phone number. And now all of a sudden, these people want to know what they could do for me. And so don't ever underestimate the power of having conversations with people and bringing them to your side.
I want to talk about the arch of freedom that you talk about, and how the natural world kind of gears itself toward that direction. I had sort of a similar conversation with Alicia Garza, your friend, and she's a little bit less hopeful in the sense that you know, she doesn't see it as an arch that's moving, but she sees it more like a circle. Things kind of keep going around and around. And I wanted to ask you about the protests, the current protests that are happening today in the street. We're seeing a lot more diversity out there, as opposed to other times when it's, especially when you talk about racial justice and Black Lives Matter, you saw mostly Black people and very few white people. Now you're seeing far more white people coming out on the street. What do you attribute that to?
I attribute that to education. I attribute that to more relationship building and really us being able to pull the scab. We have social media now. People are getting to watch the stories of people killed at the hands of police violence. People have now more direct access to the personal stories. And so I also attribute that, and this is another thing that does concern me, Andy, and I hope that people also have this concern. I do kind of attribute that to Donald Trump's presidency. And that is why I said, one time I said a very controversial statement, and you know me, Andy, I'm controversial, I can't help it. It's just who I am, it's how I was born, where I said that maybe the Trump administration first time around was the blessing that we needed to mass mobilize our communities. There's been a lot of apathy over the years. So Trump came in and Trump manifested, or he embodied, racism and Islamophobia and anti-Semitism and xenophobia and transphobia and homophobia and, you know, anti-women sentiments and everything all in one man. And he galvanized a lot of people in a way that we were unable to before. And so one of the things that I do is I want to say to the people who have been on the streets, the increase in people who've come to the streets, particularly those in the last 2-3 years, is to say to folks, what I'm afraid of is that if we do, and I want to, and I'm committed to electing a Biden-Harris administration, that the minute we defeat this fascist in the White House, I hope you don't go home. I need you to stay out in the street. And I think that's the concern of some progressive leftists who are a little kind of having a hard time with this moment, because now they're like, oh, you just want to defeat Trump. And now we're going to kill all the momentum that we have. And I'm trying to say to those people, and I'm trying also not to lie, I'm trying to say, listen, let's hope and let's continue to build relationships that the people who've come out in the streets in the last few years stay with us in the street. I need you just as visceral, just as consistent, just as outraged and angry and committed as you were under the Trump administration, under the Biden and Harris administration. And what I will promise, if you do that, is that we will see much more fruits of our labor under a Biden-Harris administration than we have seen under the Trump administration. The bottom line, Andy, we haven't seen shit under, excuse my language, under the Trump administration. There has been no progress. But if we keep up the same momentum, this consistent street organizing that we're doing, I think that we will see more product happen under a Biden-Harris administration.
You've been working very hard along with Tamika Mallory and others. You created an organization, co-founded it, called Until Freedom, basically to bring about justice for Breonna Taylor and others who've been obviously impacted by police brutality and violence, and also working on defunding the police as well as racial justice issues. Can you speak a little bit about what brought about an organization like that? Isn't there others that were doing that kind of work, and why specifically to Breonna Taylor? Why Breonna Taylor's issue is so much the focus? There's been many, many Black people that have been killed by police. I know hers was particularly egregious, you know, but a death is a death. So I'm trying to understand what brought this about.
I mean, Until Freedom really was our pivot from the Women's March on Washington and our work at the Women's March. And, you know, this is just a like accumulation of our 20 years of work in building our skills and bringing our skills into one political home. And Until Freedom for us, Andy, is a place that all are welcome to. Something that I've observed in the progressive movement is there's a lot of elitism in the progressive movement. There's a lot of intellectualism. You know, everybody's very intellectual. Everybody wants to use big words in the movement. And we feel like we're the people that understand that you have to make this as basic as you can. And we're the people, if you, and you know, you would see us here, actually an example of it here in Louisville, Kentucky. We want to go to the hood, wherever the poorest community is, the people who nobody wants to go. I'm the kind of person, if I come to a city and you try to give me suggestions and you say, this is a part of the city that you shouldn't go to because it's the most dangerous part of the city, the most, I don't know what part of the city. Guess what I do, Andy? That's exactly the place that I want to go to. And so Tamika and I and my son, Lennon, who's a hip hop artist, he's known as my son, the New York General, and another young man named Angelo Pinto. And we have a big team. Trade the Truth from Houston, Texas. We have Reverend Stephen Green, who's a young pastor that we know. So our team is very vast. We all bring skills and partnerships to the table, and we want to go to the people that nobody wants to engage. And you know, our expertise, and many of people know us. And and this is something that I will say, because women also don't like to share the things that they are good at. We are some of the best organizers and mobilizers in America right now. That's just the bottom line. And we want to take what we know how to do and bring it to local communities who do not have the same visibility, the same skills, and the same access that we do. We build campaigns, we engage the media and media advocacy, make sure that stories are told in the right way. Our focus also is on policy. We can't just, you know, say we're fighting for justice without also figuring out how the different pieces play together. I know how to protest in the street, Andy, but I also know how to sit in a boardroom with a member of Congress. And that's the kind of agility that we bring to the movement. Why Breonna Taylor? And you are absolutely right. You know, I come from New York. NYPD is one of the most notorious police departments in the country. Why Breonna Taylor? Because, Andy, I'm sick and tired of having to call and say the names of Black women across the country who have been killed at the hands of the state, and not one single one of these women has received any form of justice. And in fact, we may say their name for a month, a week, 2 weeks, and all of a sudden they disappear off the face of the earth. We are not taking away from the attention that our brothers deserve, like George Floyd, right? Like Rayshard Brooks, like Eric Garner. I mean, I was saying Eric Garner's name till today. 6 years later, I'm still saying Eric Garner. We still say Mike Brown. We still name our brothers, but our sisters just disappear off the face of the earth. The reason why also Breonna Taylor is because we believe that Louisville, Kentucky is the ground zero for this conversation on police brutality. If you're gonna protest in the entire country and say Black Lives Matter, but you cannot get justice for one Black woman, I don't know what to tell you, Andy. I really don't know what to say. And so for us, we see this as an opportunity for us to get justice for one Black woman, send a message that we will not sit idly by when Black women are murdered at the hands of the state. And it is also an opportunity to help enhance and supplement the local organizing work that's happening in a place like Louisville, because Louisville is not Brooklyn. Louisville is not Chicago, and it ain't Detroit, Michigan. This is the South of the South right here that we're dealing with. We have white militias who come protesters. I have LMPD helicopters literally over the house trying to see who goes in and goes out. We are actually came to a point where we're making an analogy. And a pastor here made this analogy. He said, Louisville is our Selma. This is a moment for us, Andy. When we come to Louisville, Kentucky, we're going up against the Bull Connors that those in the civil rights movement went up against in Alabama. The mayor is the Democratic Bull Connor. The police chief, Daniel Cameron, these are our Bull Connors. And these are people willing to arrest young people. They don't care if you're 14, 15, 16. They have the biggest batons.
Would you tell people who Bull Connor is so that for
Yes.
those that are listening, they
Of
would
course.
know a bit of context?
So for folks, yeah, no, absolutely. So folks who know the story of Selma and the march that Dr. Martin Luther King did over the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and that's a story that's also connected to Congressman John Lewis. One of the things that had happened when they tried to march over the bridge the first time with Dr. Martin Luther King is that they knew that Dr. Martin Luther King wanted to protect the marchers because he knew that there would be brutal force. And on the other side of the bridge was a man named Bull Connor. He was the sheriff, basically. And he was ready with his batons. They were ready with the guns. And so Martin Luther King was like, look, we got to go back. We can't march over this bridge right now because, you know, he's a nonviolent protester and did not want to put the marchers in harm's way. And the other marchers eventually said, no, Dr. Martin Luther King, we know that Bull Connor is on the other side of that bridge and we are going to march towards Bull Connor. And what I see in this moment, Andy, is that all these young people around the country, in Portland, in Chicago, in Detroit, in New York, in everywhere, in California, there's a young woman now, you might have heard about her, named Tiana, who was a protester in San Luis. She's been charged with 5 felonies for protesting. And so what we see in Louisville is that we are here to go up against Bull Connors, the Bull Connors of our generation. And we understand there may be violence involved. They might, you know, this is an open carry state. Everybody carries guns here. And I'm talking about guns this big. I'm not talking about a little handgun that you put in your pocket. I'm talking about the gun is taller than me. And that's what we're doing here. And we believe that Breonna Taylor will get some semblance of justice. And I hope that it starts a conversation amongst the powers that be, that we're not going to be silent. And we also, it brings us to another point about those who are kind of critical of, do we, you know, engage in elections or not? I always say, what are you willing to give up? And you know me, you know, Andy, I don't need anybody to pat me on the back. I don't need anybody to give me anything. I don't ask for anything. I moved from Brooklyn, New York. And Brooklyn is a beautiful place, and I love Brooklyn. It is who I am. It is where I was born and raised and live. And I left New York. I'm here living in Louisville, Kentucky. I didn't move from New York to Los Angeles. I moved from New York to Louisville because I believe in this from the deepest of my heart. And the question to folks that want to have a revolution and transform this country, and when I mean revolution, I mean a nonviolent revolution. That's just who I am. And I believe in that nonviolence is very powerful. If you're ready for a nonviolent revolution in this country, after this conversation you and I are having, reflect on what are you willing to sacrifice? I sacrificed everything, my career, my family, time with my family, and here I am sitting in a sweatsuit in Louisville, Kentucky. And that's the kind of commitment that we need moving forward in these movements.
For a little bit of context also, Bull Connor was a commissioner of public safety in Birmingham. And for those of you that have seen the photos of the dogs and the water hoses, the fire hoses against protesters, that's Bull Connor's work. So I think it's important to put that in a civil rights context as well. I wanted to ask you specifically about, I know that one of the issues that have come up on this, you know, on the Breonna Taylor and other people that have been killed by police, is that police have way too much power there, and there's a lot of conversation about defunding the police. There's funding, for instance, I think I just read today in Austin, Texas, they are working on defunding the police. They've taken out $100 million from the police budget and rerouting it for other social services and so on. What is your take on defunding the police? And how, that term has become kind of a controversial term, and a little and not just with the conservatives, but also with the progressive folks, because I was at a protest where there was a lot of Black people, and they saying, we don't want to defund the police. The police, we need them. In some of the communities, we need them. How do you change that dialogue to be able to get a better understanding of what that means? And what does defunding the police mean to you?
Absolutely. I think the campaign to defund the police, again, Andy, has to go back to the street. You got to knock on the doors. You have to have the conversations with the community. Because if I was a regular person and I just heard defund the police, I would be like, oh my God, I'm going to wake up tomorrow morning and there's going to be no cops. And, you know, people are not ready for that. And that's a problem. I agree 100%. And I agree with the campaign to defund the police department. And defund the police, when you explain it to people, and I have explained it to my mom, I've explained it to old Black grandmas in Brooklyn. I've done the door knocking around defunding the police in New York, getting people to call the New York City Council members. And when I have the conversation, everybody's like, I agree with that. And what I'm telling people is that defunding the police department, we have to put it in context. You know, in New York, as an example, our Department of Transportation, Department of Education, Department of Parks and Recreation, the Department of Small Businesses, and I can't remember the 5th department, but the point is those 5 departments combined still have a smaller budget than the New York Police Department by itself. And when I tell people that, they're like, outraged. They're like, what do you mean? That's just outrageous. And so what I say to people is that I use that example. I say, this is the New York Police Department, and these are the 5 agencies that are very critical to the development of our communities and the economic development of our communities and the thriving of our children and seniors. And I say to them, what we're saying is defund the police department, right? So that just means put down a few, and take those 3 and add it over here. So what we're saying is that the police department, its budgets are inflated, take some of that money and reappropriate it to other services that we need as a community to thrive: affordable housing, better infrastructure, better transportation in our communities, better educational facilities and opportunities for our children. The other point that I explain to people that I think is very important is I say to, I was talking to this one Black woman in an apartment building, and I said to her, ma'am, what about if I tell you that a police officer is not trained when there is someone in your family who's having a mental health crisis? And so the police, so I told her, as a social worker, someone goes to school for 6 to 8 years to become a licensed social worker, a licensed mental health professional. And we cannot expect a police officer who has 6 months of training to become a mental health professional to come to your son, your daughter-in-law, your child, your grandchild in a mental health crisis. So what that means is let's put the resources in mental health services so that when you call for a mental health crisis of someone that you love, an actual expert comes. Police officers, Andy, are also not educators. So there is no reason for police officers to be in our public schools. Our children deserve to go to safe schools that have more social workers and guidance counselors than cops in their schools. There isn't a person that I've spoken to that looked at me and said that what I'm saying doesn't make sense. They said, absolutely right. You are correct. This should happen. And we should have crisis management units that come to, deal with people with mental health services. So actually what I say, and I've spoken to police officers, because they've been mad too. And all of us have police officers in our families. We can't get away from them. And when I sat them down and I said, I'm doing this for you, because you should not be put in a situation that you cannot handle. And so I want you to be able to do what you were signed up to do. And what you signed up to do as a police officer is to keep people safe. You did not sign up to be a counselor or a teacher or someone who is disciplining children. That is not what I signed up for, nor did you sign up for when you became a cop. And to be honest with you, it's going to come to the level, but in some cities, even cops are coming out and saying, that doesn't sound too bad for me. If we can take police officers and shift them around where we have unarmed parts of the police department that are then trained in other aspects of de-escalation, I don't know. I do believe there are some, Andy, that might want to do this, but I'm pretty sure a lot of the police officers, particularly those in our families that I spoke to, nobody wants to carry a gun and go shooting people. But because of the lack of training and the lack of discipline and the nature of the racist history of the police department, we get to the situations that we get into. And so I think that there is a path forward that requires conversations, political education, and then engaging people.
How can people find more information about Until Freedom? I'm sure there's a lot of people really interested in this because this is an issue, obviously, that's very near and dear to so many people's hearts, I think, that are listening.
Listen, all the stars aligned for us, Andy. UntilFreedom.com, Until Freedom on Instagram, Until Freedom on Facebook. Anywhere you go, Until Freedom, Until Freedom, Until Freedom. One of the other things that we do is we're going to have a merch store, because one of the things that attracts the young people in the movement is that we walk with our, as they call, this is our gear. And so making sure that people also know when we're present, because that's important to people. People are like, in Louisville, there are people that are seeing us, the young people say the superheroes are here. We're not here to be superheroes, but this is a way to support us. You can have a nice, high quality suit and look forward to seeing our merch store on untilfreedom.com. I'm going to send you one, courtesy of me, Andy.
I love it. I want to switch a little bit the conversation to Palestine. I know you're a Palestinian American. You were born in this country. You visited Palestine. It had a huge impact on you. Your family, of course, was uprooted from there to move to this country. I wanted to ask you about the latest sort of developments in that ongoing issue, where now the UAE is trying to normalize relations with Israel. Netanyahu and Trump have tried to sign some kind of a deal to try to move this forward to stop the annexation of Palestinian land. Can you speak a little bit more about what your thoughts are about that? I assume you have thoughts about it.
The bottom line is, Andy, nobody can speak on behalf of the Palestinian people but the Palestinian people. So if you ever see any country, Egypt, UAE, Saudi Arabia, anyone making any decisions on our behalf, just know that it was not in consultation with the people of Palestine. The bottom line is, we as the American people, and I always say this to people, I'm a Palestinian and I'm an American, I'm going to organize in that context. What I need to see more of is I need people to understand our connection as Americans to this conflict. Because a lot of people will say, why always Palestine? Why not something else? Because there's a lot of horror, as you know, that happens all over the world. You know why Palestine? Because Palestine is something we're going to have to answer for. There's going to be a generation that is going to come to us, Andy, and say, what the hell were you doing during this, as people had asked, what were people doing during South African apartheid? We right now are funding the Israeli government at $10 million a day, $10 million a day. While we are telling the people of Chicago, we're shutting down your schools, while we're telling people we don't have enough money for healthcare. We cannot extend unemployment benefits for people during a global pandemic, but somehow magically appears that we have $10 million to give to the state of Israel to continue oppressing the Palestinian people. Annexation is also a term that we have to define, Andy. You know what annexation means, to be in the simplest terms? It just means stealing more land. That's really what it is. So I don't even know why people keep trying to be, you know, again, back to the elitism of the movement. Let's tell our friends who are here the truth. Annexation means that Israel wants to steal more Palestinian land and wants the stamp of approval of the American government. And we have to be able to say, not on our watch, not this American public, we are not going to allow our government to engage in this. So I am not in support of nations arbitrating anything on behalf of the Palestinian people. We're exhausted of that. We are people that, you know this, Andy, Palestinian people are some of the most brilliant people in this world. And you know what? No one has gotten to the grassroots of Palestine. We have failed leadership in Palestine. I'm not going to deny that. Our political leadership in Palestine is failed. That's just it. And we have not, as a Palestinian people, been given the space to elect our own leadership, and have actually been forced into places where we may have elected the wrong leadership. And all we need right now is for the Palestinian people to be centered in all conversations happening about what happens in the future of Palestine. And again, as you know, my position on this, there's only one path forward, Andy, and that is a one-state solution where Jews and Palestinians and Arabs and Ethiopians and whoever lives there figure out how to coexist together, where we have a government that represents all the people, where we could truly say that it is a true democracy that centers the dignity and humanity of all. And I'm not going to move from that position. That is my position. This two-state solution stuff is nonsense. It's not going to ever happen. There's no way for it to happen. And the only solution we have moving forward is a one-state solution.
We have a couple minutes left, so I have just a couple more questions. I wanted to ask you, are you going to run for office anytime soon?
Listen, I always get asked that question all the time. I'm not going to lie to you. When I was 25 years old, which was 15 years ago, that was a naive, thing that I said to myself, oh, I'm going to run for office one day. But then I found a new pathway for me, Andy, and that is, why do I have to run? I can run everybody else for office. And so as you have seen over the last almost 10 years, I've been running pro-Palestine candidates. I've been running Muslims and Arab Americans and supporting and fundraising and knocking doors and building field programs. And this is where I found my purpose. So what you will see from me over the next couple of years is you're going to see a lot of brave, bold candidates that are going to go to office. And I promise you, somewhere in there, I'm involved in that.
Well, you're pretty young, so and they say to never say never, especially if you're in this arena.
When I'm 60, I'll go in there to get a pension or something, because I need a pension. That's the problem for the activists. I don't have a retirement plan, so I might think about that later to get that retirement plan.
So, and final question that we've asked all of our guests during this Zoom conversation: imagine a dinner party that you're hosting, and you want to invite people to this party. 1, 2, half a dozen, whatever, people from the past, or someone that you haven't met, maybe from the present, that you'd like to invite to this party. Who would those people be?
Ooh, that's a good one. I would definitely, I think a person that I would invite, that I think you would shut down Zoom. I would invite Malcolm X Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz, God rest his soul. And in the present time, I would invite definitely Tamika D. Mallory. I think that she's someone that even more people need to know and hear on a more intimate level. She is literally the sojourner truth of our time, and I hope that you all get to experience her as I do.
And anybody else?
Oh my God, so many people. You're putting me on the spot here. So many. So many. I mean, Cori Bush is another one. Like, I really want more people to know who Cori Bush is and her politics and how brave and wonderful she is. I mean, a lot of hip hop artists that I'm working right now. There's a guy out of Houston, Texas named Trey the Truth that I would love for you to meet. Andy, you would be so inspired by him and his work. He's a very well-known hip hop artist.
Yes.
My mom is a great lady that people should meet. I don't know.
So what you're asking is not impossible, with the exception of Malcolm X, which you can't bring back. But pretty much everybody else you have access to.
No one's impossible these days. Nothing's impossible.
Well, it's been such a joy talking to you. Thank you so much. And we're going to have Tamika. I'm going to ask her to join us on the Zoom conversation sometime soon.
Oh, I definitely will encourage her to make sure she responds to you, Andy.
Wonderful. Thank you. It's such a joy to have you, and stay safe.
Thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate having this wonderful conversation with all of you. Register to vote. Stay fired up. We're going to win, I promise. And then we're going to fight the next day.
Love you. Thank you.
Love you too.
So next week we're going to have Diane Ravish. Diane Ravish is an education specialist. She knows more about education and education reform than anyone else you'll ever meet. We'll have a real deep conversation about education, the education system in this country, and where it's heading. And then after that, we're going to have Michael Moore, the filmmaker and activist. Michael Moore will be there the week after. So stay tuned. Please tell your friends to join us. If you can't get in on our Zoom conversation, you can watch it on our Facebook Live. And remember, you can go back and look at previous conversations that we had. Until next week, stay safe. Thank you.